The game is Abadox, and you know I love video games that have an X in the title, like Xevious, Zaxxon, Xenophobe, Truxton, Golden Axe, probably didn't expect that one, and Abadox, which may be the hardest of the bunch, and that says a lot because Xevious and Truxton are pretty tough. Abadox is downright impossible after level 3. The first thing that struck me about this game was, hey, look at the giant tongue trying to lick the robot with lasers. That's a huge selling point right there. As is playing this game with the NES Advantage, the slow motion and turbo fire come in extremely handy. I like Abadox. This game is like a combination of Gradius and R-Type, and it knows it. In fact, the first thing that struck me about Abadox was the music. I'm like, wow, this game sounds a lot like Gradius. Did a bit of research on the internet. Apparently it's the same music composer and Contra, Blades of Steel. So pretty kick-ass music. And the art design is great. I love the biological innards theme they've got going on here. You're flying through an alien digestive system, I believe, so this thing should be easy to kill. Just feed it some Taco Bell. Follow that up with a laser beam enema. Alright, so what makes this game really tough, in addition to everything in it, is that when you die, you lose all of your weapon and speed power-ups, and then it's impossible. Then you may as well just give up. Also, it sends you back to a checkpoint like R-Type. So the only way to get anywhere in Abadox is to never die. Don't die. Ever. Don't take any hits. Because the weapon power-ups make this game. You're pretty strong after you've collected a bunch of missiles, and the spread shot lasers are nice, and this guy really should see a doctor. There's something very wrong here. What did this thing eat? Instead of lasers, you should try bombing this thing with a box of Fiber One. One of the other things that makes Abadox pretty interesting is the vertical scrolling segments in the game fly in the reverse direction than usual. You just keep going deeper and deeper into this thing. Oh, and let me tell you, there's a surprise waiting for you at the end. And the only way to see it is to find the cheat code on the internet. This is a one-shot, one-kill kind of game, and once you lose your weapon, you just gotta start over from the beginning. But if you find the invincibility code, well, that does help a bit. I actually had quite a good time just flying through the game with the invincibility code, which is how I got the footage of some of the later levels here. Otherwise, I would have never gotten them. Sorry, I'm not that good at anything, really. But I do have a classic game room shout out and thank you going to my friend Justin from Surrey, British Columbia in Canada. Thank you for sending Abadox to the show. This game is cool. From Milton Bradley, it's not one of the more sought after spaceship shooter style games on the Nintendo. But it's fun and you gotta love the title. And the cartridge artwork is great. The Deadly Inner War. Bet it smells awesome in there. really haven't played Donkey Kong until you've played it in a Xevious arcade cabinet. Check out the spaceships. They have a lot to do with Donkey Kong. Welcome to Classic Game Room, broadcasting from the Intergalactic Space Arcade. Is your arcade missing a Donkey Kong machine? Well, so is mine, but that's alright because you can still play Donkey Kong on the NES. What really makes this shot classy is that there's lawn chairs in the back of the El Camino. Lawn chairs upon which you can place your bum when playing Donkey Kong on the Nintendo Entertainment System, the 8-bit version of the 1981 arcade classic. Every time I play Donkey Kong, I'm reminded of that scene in Billy Madison where Billy's arguing with the little kid about whether Mortal Kombat or Donkey Kong is the best game ever, because I always chime in at that point and remind both of them that Ms. Pac-Man, or at least Earth Defense Force 2017, is the best game ever. Donkey Kong is a very good game, one that I can only take in small doses. I end up just getting frustrated when he's throwing barrels at me, and lose quickly. But let's talk about the NES version of Donkey Kong, which, as you can see, is excellent. I love these sound effects in particular. Try turning up the volume and listening to him run. I wish I could make those noises when I run. I guess I can. I'm gonna go around all day today doing that. Mark, what's wrong with you? Nothing. That's how I sound. Shut up. This game promotes faulty construction and cruelty to animals. Now let's just try to dodge these barrels once again. I gotta hand it to Mario. I think he looks better climbing ladders than Lara Croft. Those overalls just shape his ass perfectly. I know what you're thinking, Mark. Don't objectify Mario. He's not even real. I beg to differ. He's the world's most popular video game character to millions of people. He is real. And he's certainly keeping it real in this version of Donkey Kong, which is a competent version of the arcade game, although not exactly the same. It's pretty close though, and totally worth owning if you're a Donkey Kong fan collecting for the NES. Donkey Kong is available on most of the old school 80s game consoles, and you can obviously get this for just about anything with a Nintendo brand on it. It's available for download from the Virtual Console, and I've also got it on my Xevious Multicade. But when it comes to the 80s home console versions, I think this one is pretty much the best. It looks good, it sounds good, and it plays well, so a big thanks once again to our friend Mark from Brooklyn, New York for sending this to the show, along with Mario Brothers and Ms. Pac-Man on the NES. It's Donkey Kong, it's on the Nintendo, and it plays well with the old school Nintendo D-pad. Just turn up the volume and listen to him run. The game did try to rob me of my umbrella there. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but anyway, thanks again to Mark from Brooklyn. Before he got his own series and drove carts, he was the bad guy, trying to tear Mario in half in Donkey Kong, because it's on in Tron. That's not how that goes, is it? When can I just call in an airstrike? I've saved the princess once again. Oh, but she broke my heart. She's a tease. Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room. I love the artwork on this one. Get ready for Cobra Triangle on your Nintendo Entertainment System. brilliant intro graphic and excellent music, this is Cobra Triangle for the NES, released in 1989. From developer Rare, the same folks who brought us the excellent RC Pro-Am on the NES. And this plays a lot like RC Pro-Am with boats. But it's not the same game at all. If anything, it's like RC Pro-Am meets Spy Hunter meets Gradius. There's a lot to like and a lot to get seriously frustrated about in Cobra Triangle. For starters, technically, it's extremely solid. What you would expect from Rare. It looks and plays a lot like RC Pro-Am. In fact, the controls are nearly the same, but instead of just racing, you're making your way through a wide variety of mission types, everything from racing to dropping off mines, which is what I'm doing here, saving civilians, jumping waterfalls, battling end bosses, and more. You collect weapon and speed upgrades, and you activate those in the same way that you do in Gradius or Life Force. I love the music and the overall look of the game, but you know what I don't like? And if you've played this game, I'm sure you can guess. It's these stupid waterfall levels. They're not fun, they're just irritating, and they break up the flow of what would otherwise be an amazing NES game. Now, it's still pretty good as it is, but the waterfall sucks. You accelerate and have to dodge the whirlpool and hit that moving ramp at just the right moment, and there's a whole bunch of them, by the way. I tried turning around and doing it again. I tried memorizing the pattern. I tried everything possible until I eventually just got lucky. I could never do that again no matter how many times I tried. And the thing is, by the time I was done playing this game, I never wanted to do it again. Like, I'd rather play RC Pro-Am. That's not to say I don't recommend Cobra Triangle. There's some great stuff in here. Just be forewarned, you'll hate waterfalls for the rest of your life. Which I already hated anyway, thanks to TLC. Come to think of it, I don't like whirlpools all that much either. You know, I'm not sure what to say about this one because I think it's a good game on many levels, but I just don't like it. And I think that's because deep down, regardless of whether or not you like this game, I want to play more RC Pro-Am, and this isn't RC Pro-Am, it's Cobra Triangle. Which does pack a good dose of that. Remember how hard NES games used to be? So if you've got the time and the patience for that, well, good luck getting through this one. I love the music and the look and feel of the game. I think it's ambitious and technically solid. It's just not terribly well balanced, and that throws it off for me. And, like I said, admittedly, what I want to play is RC Pro-Am with boats, and that's not what this game is. This one is pretty inexpensive and easy to find, so if you think it looks cool and you're up for a challenge, have fun with those waterfalls, by the way. Don't say I didn't warn you. Then I do recommend Cobra Triangle. Like usual these days, I've got a classic game room shout out and thank you to send to my man Ben from Buffalo, New York. Thank you, Ben, for sending Cobra Triangle and rekindling my hatred and distrust of waterfalls. Presented by Pony Inc. and descended by Compile, this is Zanac, not to be confused with the drug Xanax, which is used to lower anxiety. Zanac is used to raise your anxiety. So if you see someone having a panic attack on an airplane, offer them some Zanac. And when they say yes, tape their eyelids open and force them to play this game. You should see their head explode. Because Zanac is the complete opposite of relaxing. The aliens in this game are just high on something. Or at least the designers were. And since this is designed by Compile, Zanac could be considered a distant ancestor to the amazing Musha, a far more straightforward game than this one. This 1986 release for the NES is just kind of an odd spaceship shooter. One that really has a mind of its own. And I think it supposedly has adaptive AI that learns how you play. I don't know if it does that or not, but it's absolutely brutal. And a bit choppy on the NES, which doesn't make it any easier. So, you may have noticed the numbers flying all over the place. Those are weapon power-ups. And you can stack them to increase their strength. For instance, I like to rely on number 2, which is the shield, because it's very difficult to dodge enemy fire in this game, since it's coming at you from all directions. The number 3 has a circular pattern around your ship, which is nice for protection. Number 6 is a flamethrower, which is very powerful and actually a nice weapon upgrade in this game. Your standard gun upgrades are always a bit of a challenge as they come at you in a formation of blocks. You have to pick the right one to shoot to get it. And as your spaceship is exploding left and right beyond your control, at least you can enjoy the music as you die. Because while Zanac lacks the visual charm and excitement of Musha, it does pack one of the better spaceship shooter musical scores for the NES. Zanac is a game for those who are serious about their spaceship shooters, because the enemies attack you in a variety of unorthodox ways. Spinning, zigzagging back and forth, forming enemies behind you and then attacking you. You'll find that the shield is extremely powerful and helps you survive for sure, but it does limit your firepower. I'm on the fence with this game. I'm not entirely sure if I like it or just want to play something a little more stylish and straightforward. I respect its frantic nature, and the weapon upgrade system is challenging to get and definitely mixes up the gameplay, because you're almost never going to play Zanac the same way twice. At the end of each level, you'll face these Xevious-style end bosses, and if you are destroyed, when you're destroyed, you can continue. The Zanac game cartridge can be found relatively easily these days for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It's also available for the Virtual Console on the Wii. I'll recommend Zanac for those who really enjoy the genre. I'll prescribe Zanac. If you're craving more of a challenge in your vertical scrolling spaceship shooters, take 2 Zanac game cartridges and don't call me while you're in mourning after the loss of your NES when you've smashed it to bits. you ever read the back of these? Do not store in extreme temperatures. Do not immerse in water. Do not clean with benzene. They're like gremlins. Are you ready to go Commando with Capcom's 1985 arcade classic, seen here on the Nintendo Entertainment System? Released in 1986 to the NES, this game used to be a really big deal. You don't hear about it as much these days, but its influence in the top-down, run-and-gun shooter genre can still be felt well into the future. Commando is a great old-school ass-kicking good time, and helped to pave the way for so many other great games like Ikari Warriors, Mercs, Shock Troopers, you name it. If it's a top-down run-and-gun shooter, it was influenced by Commando. No relation to the Bill Paxton, Alyssa Milano movie with the same name, that also had that other guy from Predator. To be honest, that was Bill Paxton's movie in the same way that A View to a Kill is Dolph Lundgren's. Look it up. This is what I did when I was a kid. I watched a lot of movies, and I played Commando on the computer. I had the PC version on 5 1/4 inch floppy disk. I did not actually have the NES game back in the day, so I'm revisiting Commando here after many years. And while my brain cells have been pretty much destroyed over the past couple decades, through no fault of my own of course, there are some definite differences between the two versions. The PC version, as I remember it, looked a lot better, and had more enemies. But then again, I also remember the 1980s being exactly like Miami Vice in every single way. I also remember being a lot better at run-and-gun style games like this and Ikari Warriors. Before all these games used dual analog controls or dual thumbsticks, you literally gun in the direction that you're running. It's a run-and-gun shooter. Don't overthink it. Run and shoot. You can't strafe except with your grenades, and you only have a limited number of them. At the end of each mission, you fight a massive wave of enemies, and that's pretty tricky when you can only shoot in the direction that you're running. Then make your way through the doors, smoke, drink, or eat whatever they give you, and move on to the next round. While this isn't the version of the game I grew up with, I like the NES version because it's got that classic Capcom 8-bit sound. It just brings me back to the days of playing Bionic Commando. Also from Capcom, FYI, in that game you play as Nathan Red Spencer, whose mission is to save Super Joe, the guy you're controlling in this game. It's all connected, and then at the end it turns out you're his father and he's got a twin sister named Chun-Li. Nah, I made that up. That would be a dramatic turn of events, though. Before Capcom turned into Street Fighter and Resident Evil the company, they made incredible arcade games. And along with Konami, pretty much dominated the NES with amazing release after amazing release, all through the late 80s. We've got this game, Bionic Commando, 1943, Strider, DuckTales, Mega Man, Ghosts and Goblins, Legendary Wings, and of course, Willow. After Super Joe saves the day, he goes back and saves the day again, except this time it's harder. It's Commando, a blast from the past worth owning on your Nintendo Entertainment System. I absolutely love the Capcom drum sounds. What do Rambo, a DeLorean, Duran Duran, and the Vic Viper spaceship all have in common? Other than the fact that all those things are awesome, they all have something to do with 1985, because when you think about pop culture in 1985, a whole lot happened. The last James Bond film featuring Roger Moore, A View to a Kill, was released with Duran Duran singing the title theme, which happens to be my favorite Bond theme. The original Back to the Future movie came out in theaters that year. Rambo First Blood Part 2 came out in 1985. And the first Gradius debuted in the arcades in Japan that year. There was also a Godzilla movie, Godzilla 1985. Can't believe I forgot that one. Sadly, I wasn't playing video games in Japanese arcades in 1985, but if you were, you could have been singing along to Huey Lewis and the News and The Power of Love while destroying aliens in the Vic Viper spaceship for the first time. I did play Gradius frequently on the Nintendo Entertainment System, and that's what we're looking at here. Gradius is one of the most popular, entertaining, lasting, fun, challenging spaceship side-scrolling shoot-'em-ups ever created. I spent more time in the last few years playing Gradius 5 on the PlayStation 2, so it's a lot of fun to go back and revisit the first one. Gradius gameplay, as you can see on screen, is solid, traditional side-scrolling action. The controls on the NES are fantastic. Graphically, the game looks very nice. I'll break this into a two-part review and just lay out some of the basics here, then we'll get into some of the challenging later levels in part 2. Rather than picking up various weapons floating around in space, you upgrade your weapon by picking up power-ups after destroying various enemies. You can give yourself a 2-shot or a laser beam. There's the familiar options, which are those little red things that you can gain, and they help to increase your firepower. You can get a shield. And as you collect these power-up things in space, you choose when to activate them or when to cash them in, whatever you want to call it. You can also use the power-ups to increase your speed numerous times, and when your ship is destroyed, you then lose all your power-ups and your speed upgrades, so you become a very slow, weak Vic Viper, which is where much of the challenge in the game comes from, because you really don't want to get destroyed. When I play this game, I tend to find myself upgrading everything in the first 2 levels and then keeping the shield on standby so that when I lose my shield, I have 6 upgrades or 6 power-ups ready to go on the bottom. Then I just activate it and get another shield. The game may look simple in some respects, but actually it's quite challenging and does require strategy. You have to know when to use certain weapons. It's the kind of game where you definitely get an advantage the more you play it and the more you memorize. In part 2 of the review, we'll look at some of the later levels and some of the stuff that makes Gradius a lasting series today. Some 20 years after the debut in the arcades, Gradius games are still being released, and it remains one of the most popular side-scrolling shooting series in existence. If not the most popular. It's hard for me to say because I like them all. When you look at the Thunder Force series and R-Type games and Gradius games, it's hard to determine what's the best because they're all so much fun to play. They all have their slight differences, even though they may be two-dimensional, for the most part, two-dimensional side-scrolling video games. We'll continue the review here in part 2 and some of the later levels as I continue piloting the Vic Viper spaceship and remember some of the strategy to get through these parts. I highly recommend the first Gradius on the NES, as well as any of the other versions and sequels out there. They're excellent games, and if you like spaceship shooters, they are a must-play. This game takes my breath away. It's Top Gun for the Nintendo Entertainment System from 1987. Bringing the danger zone into living rooms everywhere. Because everyone had this game back in the day. Everyone. One of the early games on the NES that showed how the little gray box could bitch slap every other console on the market. Top Gun was unreal at the time, and it's still playable today, and it's damned hard. It's kind of like Afterburner, but not really. Because in Sega's Afterburner or Space Harrier, you could dodge the enemy fire. In Top Gun, you have to shoot down their missiles with a machine gun. Dude, that's hardcore. Slam on the brakes, I'm sure he'll fly right by and not actually crash into you. It works in the movie. They just remade this game and I'm reviewing it on PlayStation 3, but fortunately it doesn't suck. It's okay, but if you played this one back in the day, it was like life-changing to see what video games could do. Or at least that's how I felt. Top Gun was one of the flagship titles on the NES that demonstrated what an awesome piece of hardware it was. Because as much as I loved my Atari 7800, which I had at that time, I knew it couldn't do this. It could play Robotron and Xevious, but it could not do this. And damn, I wanted this game so bad. I played this at a friend's house a lot, and I remember being one of the only kids that could land the jet consistently. I may be one of the few people on Earth who actually enjoys the landing sequences in Top Gun. I always thought they were really cool, and I still do. They give a nice break from the action. They add a touch of realism. I mean, you don't want to crash this thing. It's expensive, and you'll drown after you explode. And then the pieces of your carcass will be eaten by sharks, who could accidentally choke on metal from the exploded airplane and also die. So you've got to think about the environment as well when you're playing Top Gun. Because if you kill sharks, you're also disrupting the balance of nature. So for all of you who don't like the landing sequences in Top Gun, suck it up and do it for the good of the planet. And also because it restocks your airplane with weapons. Alright, first mission is pretty easy. Second mission is where things start getting difficult. The controls in Top Gun are predictable. You shoot and you can also lock onto enemies and fire missiles. Like most console-based flight games from the era, you only have a very limited range of motion and cannot fly all over the place. If you wanted to do that, you had to go buy F-15 Strike Eagle for the computer. Top Gun is one of the Silver Label game cartridges published by Konami, who had an amazing catalog of games at that time. And even to this day, when I think of Konami, I still think of Top Gun. And many of the other Silver Label cartridges, like Life Force, Track and Field 2, Russian Attack, Gradius, there were so many good ones. Damn those missiles, those things are tough, because sometimes you can dodge them, but just when you figure out that you can't dodge it, it's then too late to shoot it, and then you're screwed. So ideally, you want to shoot all of the missiles on screen, which is not particularly easy, and Top Gun is not easy because of that. Time to refuel and restock your weapons. How does that thing restock your weapons mid-flight? How does that work? I mean, come on, this game has about as much realism as when G.I. Joe flew their F-14s into space. Which is sort of like the last level of this game, I think. Not that I'm going to get there in this review. I'm nowhere near as good as I used to be. If I'm not mistaken, there's 4 levels in Top Gun, and like many games from the era, it just doesn't let up. It was meant to test your will, so unlike games these days, with their convenient checkpoints, which is convenient for longer games, but Top Gun is like an arcade game, short, fast, and amazingly challenging. You're also being scored for points, and if you're up for the challenge, Top Gun is extremely easy to find for the NES. And if for some reason you've never seen the movie, do so at once because it's awesome. There's nothing like some romance, beach volleyball, and airplanes making things explode. All wrapped within a Kenny Loggins soundtrack. Why is it just movies that get that? We should all have Kenny Loggins soundtracks. Every time I enter a room, Footloose begins to play. Whoever came up with the saying, "Down with the man," clearly never played Pac-Man. Or if they did, they only played the Atari 2600 version, in which case that saying makes complete sense. How about a new one? Up with the man! Pac-Man on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Who's the man? Pac's the man. Pac-Man was one of the most popular video games in the early 1980s. Sadly, Pac-Man had kind of a rough landing onto the home game console market with an abysmal Atari 2600 release. Not so with the Nintendo Entertainment System. NES owners got a bitchin' version of this rad game. Awesome. Anyway, the Nintendo Entertainment System and this version of Pac-Man were released many years after the Atari 2600 and that version of Pac-Man. So naturally, there's quite a bit of improvement here. In fact, you get a very nice version of Pac-Man for the Nintendo Entertainment System. It looks nice, it sounds good, and it plays pretty much like Pac-Man. It starts off very slowly, though, and then rapidly picks up speed. So this does have kind of a unique take on Pac-Man. It is slightly different than the actual arcade game. But I'm not sure that I would recommend that you go out and find this particular version of Pac-Man for any one specific reason. It's just a good version of Pac-Man. You know what this game could really use? Think about it. Flamethrowers. Like when you come back with an extra life, you should look like Dig Dug with a flamethrower. They may be ghosts, but I'll bet they're flammable. What are they ghosts of, by the way? Has that ever been explained? Who or what died to create the ghosts in Pac-Man? The ghost of Christmas, present, past, future, and Casper's brother. I don't know. I'll jump ahead a few levels here. This is where the gameplay starts picking up speed, where the game actually becomes challenging. If you played Pac-Man ever before, if you like Pac-Man, I think it starts off too slowly. You have to grind through those initial couple levels, earning as many points as possible, and then fight for your life when the game gets faster. I do like the presentation. You get to see the entire full screen on the left, and then all the, other stuff like the numbers, the score, and the extra Pac-Mans that you have are on the right. I like that the score shows up in white numbers on a black background that you can easily read. You don't need a decoder ring or anything. That's presentation. My only disappointment with this version of Pac-Man is that it does not get the kind of presentation that Ms. Pac-Man got on the Sega Genesis several years later. That version of Ms. Pac-Man is really cool because you get a good version of the game and a number of additional mazes keeping with the traditional Ms. Pac-Man style. I'd have liked to see them take this one a bit further because the NES was perfectly capable of that. But as it is, this is a nice traditional version of Pac-Man for a home game console, and fans of the series back in the day would be fortunate to have this game cartridge. As I am fortunate to have this game cartridge donated to Classic Game Room by Andrew in Pennsylvania, the great Keystone State of the nation. Do you know why they call Pennsylvania the Keystone State? Because we invented keystones. The license plates used to read, "You've got a friend in Pennsylvania." They no longer say that. I'm not sure what that means. I just Felt like throwing that out there. Thank you, Andrew. You've got a friend in Pennsylvania. Classic Game Room. That's what the license plates should say. And instead of random numbers and letters, they should all have names of different Atari 2600 games. Another nice thing about this particular version of Pac-Man is the artwork on the game cartridge. It's one of those Tengen game cartridges, so it doesn't look like the standard gray Nintendo Entertainment System cartridges. And the artwork on the game cartridge is classy, because Pac-Man is wearing a hat. A pimp hat. When you play this game right, Pac-Man puts those ghosts out on Ho Road.
Banished from Earth, Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room. We all know that Pinbot is a great pinball machine, but is it a good game on the NES? Let's find out. Originally released in 1986 from Williams, Pinbot is a pretty badass and ambitious pinball machine. And it must have sold pretty well to get its own game on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1988. This is from Rare, which, as you know, means it's off to a good start. And this one is quite fascinating because a lot of the old school video game pinball games had a tough time recreating pinball. Because they couldn't get the physics right back then, and while this game doesn't do a great job with the physics either, it does do a good job converting a real-life physical pinball machine into an 8-bit video game pinball machine. Like I just made Pinbot angry. I like an angry Pinbot. I love these sound effects and speech in this game. The best part of Pinbot on the NES is that it's not a one-to-one recreation of the actual pinball machine. This is an early example of taking a pinball machine, or taking the pinball machine concept, and making it ridiculous. There's stuff in here that you could never see in a real-life physical pinball machine. Now, we're all pretty used to that now, with fire and zombies and water effects in video game pinball games. But back in the 80s, this was a novel concept, and I would say it's fairly well executed here. No, don't eat my balls! Wait. Like most of the other old-school video game pinball games, it struggles with control because there's no analog controls. You have no feel for the ball on the table whatsoever, so it's very hard to aim your shots. The left ramp there in particular is kind of weird since there's no real way to aim your shot at it. It gives you some leeway and kind of sucks the ball up onto the ramp if you get it nearby. I wasn't sure what I thought of the split playfield screen effect during gameplay, but after a while, I got used to it. Now we're on level 3, where instead of the monster eating the pinball in the middle of the playfield, there's another creature flying around, and the game nukes your flippers. I'll show you that in a moment. It's been a while since I've played the actual Pinbot pinball machine, but basically what you do is open up Pinbot's visors, fire the pinball into Pinbot's robot eye sockets, activate multi-ball, and go for big points. If you do a few other things in there and hit the ramp, you'll progress to the next level. Normally when playing pinball, I would recommend that you aim for the blinky thing, but in this case, since everything is blinky, it takes some practice to figure out how to play Pinbot. Woo! Disco Pinbot! No! Eventually, Disco Pinbot loses patience with its human player and drops bombs on its flippers, which is super frustrating. I'm not sure I've ever seen that effect before. It messes with your game a lot. I like the weird music and sound effects in this one. It's got a lot of good bass, too. This is a fun game on the NES. You don't need to be a fan of the original Pinbot pinball machine to enjoy this one, although it would probably help to have some familiarity with the machine. In any event, the bottom line here is that Pinbot is reasonably affordable and easy to collect online. And I've got a classic game room shout out and thank you going to Neil from Decatur, Alabama. Thank you, Neil. Thank you for sending Pinbot, a perfect addition to Mecha March Madness. An entire month celebrating mechs, robots, and cyborgs. Good times, Pinbot. One of the better NES pinball games for sure, although I still prefer Bride of Pinbot. That game is amazing. What we need now is Bride of Pinbot on the NES. Someone homebrew that. After losing a game of Pinbot, wipe away your tears and rock out to the excellent music while entering your initials. Good tunes. Thank you for watching this classic game room review. Let's take a close-up look at the cartridge artwork. Dare Pinbot to the Pinball Challenge. But I like Bride of Pinbot. Can I dare her to the Pinball Challenge? She was hot. Here it is, the beautiful game cartridge for Pinbot, which has a lot going on in the artwork if you look closely. Beyond the obvious title of the game, the robot's face is downright bizarre and there's human beings on the inside driving it. Or at least I think they're humans. I'm not sure actually. There's a space shuttle off to the right, NASA off to the left. I think there's an EQ in the middle of it and random pipes and hoses. Dare Pinbot to the Pinball Challenge. I'm not so sure. Pinbot cheats. Thank you for watching. Follow Classic Game Room on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Patreon. If you enjoyed this review, then you need to watch my review of the Pinball of the Dead for Game Boy Advance. Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Image projector, okay. Cyber connector, okay. Control system, okay. It's Image Fight for the NES from IREM. Copyright 1990 for your Nintendo Entertainment System. I love the cartridge artwork on this one. That's why I bought it. I saw the cartridge art and I'm like, yeah. Lasers, spaceship, cool looking dude that looks like Captain Power. Need it. And have it now. I do. It's an interesting game, actually. One I've never heard of before. And one that you might be interested in playing if you like old school 80s and early 90s spaceship shooters on your NES. As you might imagine, Image Fight is pretty brutal from IREM, the sadistic bastards who made R-Type.
What you do in this game is not all that dissimilar from what you do in every other game like this. You fly up and shoot everything that gets in your way. What makes it interesting is certainly not the music. It's actually pretty bad. Until you get near the end. Some of the ending music is alright, but what makes this one interesting is the style and the variety of weapons that you collect. It's not the best game in the genre on the NES, but it's far from the worst. This is kind of average, but still worth playing if you like these. Now you may notice as you fly around that you collect what looks like little robot heads. Those are, I guess, your auxiliary cannons, or I don't have the instruction manual, so I'm not really sure what's going on in this game. But you can collect up to 3 of those little cannons, and depending on what color they are, blue flies straight ahead, red moves in the fires in the reverse direction from which you're flying. So they're kind of like the little buddies in Musha, sort of. And then you collect various armor upgrades or weapon upgrades as you fly through your adventure. And as far as I can tell, the only way to change them is to take a hit, since they can absorb one hit and then collect another one. But the best one depends on which level you're flying through. For this level, I like the spread shot, which takes out enemies on the side. Image Fight is one of these spaceship shooters, which is, in my opinion, fairly unbalanced. Like, the majority of the gameplay is actually not that hard. Until you get to the end bosses. The boss battles move so fast that you will thank Lord Carnage every day for the fact that the NES Advantage includes a slow motion button. Also, the auto fire comes in super handy for this game because your finger will get super tired repeatedly pressing fire. It's like Irem hates you. My brain does not move fast enough to comprehend some of the gameplay in here. For the most part, Image Fight isn't all that difficult. There's just these sections which are downright impossible. And from what I can tell, what you do in this game is you fly through like a virtual reality spaceship combat simulation, and then near the end of the game, or like halfway through the game, you fight the real battle. So I don't know why, this one kind of reminds me of Ender's Game or something. Like the whole thing is a virtual reality simulation until, oh, we're doing it for real now. It's more or less exactly the same, except it's in space. It might make more sense if I had the instruction manual, but I just picked up the cartridge. I actually bought this from Jason in Pittsburgh when I was at a recent Pittsburgh Comic-Con. And Jason watches the show, so thank you, Jason. Cheers. Image Fight is not one of the compile shooters. It's not in particularly high demand, so you can find this for a couple bucks. And it does have some interesting gameplay. For the most part, it feels a bit half-baked compared to a lot of the other really good spaceship games. But Image Fight has its moments, and the cartridge artwork is gorgeous. I actually feature this in one of my upcoming books as just being one of the best-looking spaceship shooter game cartridges in a sea of good-looking spaceship shooter game cartridges. It's like a cross between Star Soldier and Captain Power. You just can't go wrong with that, and the type font is awesome. Now, one of the things that does make Image Fight really tricky is that if you're destroyed, or when you're destroyed during one of the levels or an end boss battle, it sends you all the way back to the beginning. Thanks, Irem. Thanks for being cruel and unforgiving. Not even a checkpoint, just back to the beginning of the level. I think it's safe to say that we won't be seeing a vinyl re-release of the Image Fight soundtrack anytime soon. Subjective, I know, but this one just sounds off-key for pretty much the whole game. There's a couple songs which are alright, but... I think the sound designer was tone deaf for this one. Compare this to something like Zanac or Gunnac or Super Mario Brothers, and you'll hear quite a difference, but this is the song that confused me, because this one's not half bad. So did the sound designer's assistant make the rest of this? I don't get it. I'm just confused. But I'm confused about pretty much everything anyway, so that's par for the course. It's Image Fight, which is recommended if you like these super old school spaceship shooters. Don't expect the best game on the NES, but it's far from the worst. It's the fight for your image. It's Image Fight. So clearly the sequel, if released in the modern era, should be titled Selfie Battle.
Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room. Let's pull this Nintendo game out of its protective sleeve, leaving it vulnerable. Just long enough to show you that it's Galaga, and then put it back in, and neatly place it on the shelf. Enjoy the review. Just kick back and enjoy the smooth, relaxing beats of Galaga, capably handled by the Nintendo Entertainment System, which may not be known for its arcade games, but Galaga is a good one. And it's good on pretty much anything. You really don't need a whole lot of horsepower to handle 1981's Galaga, but you still want the game to play well, which it does here. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the game, Galaga is more than just a colorful version of Space Invaders. It's the sequel to 1979's Galaxian and features a wide variety of ways that you can score points. Here's where I'm letting the aliens kidnap my spaceship. Take one of my extra lives because I'm going to put it to good use soon. There you go. If you can shoot that guy without blowing up your spaceship, you get it back, and then you have twice the firepower, but you're also twice the fat target to hit. Yeah, there's lots of cool tricks like that in Galaga. You also get more points for shooting enemies in the air, rather than just blowing them away in their little Space Invaders like line that moves back and forth. And here's something else you won't find in Space Invaders, this awesome challenge stage, which isn't too hard when you have two spaceships firing in tandem. But don't let the ease that I'm wiping these aliens out deceive you. Galaga is insanely hard. In fact, I'm terrible at this game, even though I really enjoy it. And I like this version of Galaga. It's as good as just about any other version of Galaga I've seen, including the excellent Atari 7800 Galaga. I've also played the arcade machine quite a bit. You can frequently find a Ms. Pac-Man Galaga 20th Anniversary Collection machine out there if you look for it. And of course, Galaga is featured in the beginning of War Games. Matthew Broderick is playing it in the diner or restaurant at the beginning of the movie. Way to go, me. I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn right there.
letting the enemy capture your spaceship is definitely a risk versus reward decision. You get twice the firepower, but then you also lose an extra life. So try not to squander it like I did there, poorly. Getting back to the NES game, I think the sound and the music and the gameplay, the graphics, everything looks quite good for a 1980s Nintendo game. Galaga may be simple by today's standards, but you still want the home console version to play like the arcade game, which it does nicely here. So if you're collecting for the NES and you love Galaga, yes, I would recommend this. But there's many other ways that you can also find Galaga these days. Namco has been hard at work keeping one of its best games relevant. It's also on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and like I said, keep an eye out for that Galaga Ms. Pac-Man arcade machine. It's one of the games you're likely to see in a bar or restaurant somewhere. Uh-oh, a challenge stage with only one spaceship that I don't have memorized. I'm going to make a mess of this, so I'll just cover up the footage with the map. Thank you once again to Mark from Fresh Meadows in New York for sending Galaga on the NES to the show. Excellent game on or off the Nintendo Entertainment System. If you're looking for a serious old school arcade style challenge, then you can't go wrong with a couple games of Galaga. Just don't expect it to be easy. Welcome to Classic Game Room. The NES is known for having some amazing light gun shooting games using the NES Zapper, but none of them are as challenging as this. It's To the Earth on Nintendo Entertainment System. You gotta do whatever you gotta do to aim well in this game because it's brutal. It's To the Earth, published by Nintendo in 1989. This is the most intense light gun shooting game I think I've ever played. It's fast, it's ferocious, and you need really good aim to survive. Enemy spaceships attack you at warp speed and shower you with missiles. Occasionally, the game gives you a small break and just pelts you with giant meteors instead. To the Earth has some decent art design and good music. Let's take a look at the intro because there's a rich, deep, and in-depth storyline here. Why are you flying to the Earth? Well, let's find out. The Rogosians have invaded the Earth with a dastardly bacteriological weapon, and you are on a special mission to bring the antibacterial agent from the Neptune Terrestrial Allied Force Base Triton to the Earth. You're not just fighting spaceships because they're there. You're fighting spaceships because they're trying to stop you from delivering, damn, I already forgot. You know what, we're just gonna shoot everything on screen because it's there. Also, everything that moves will kill you. Except for your own spaceship, but it's slow and harmless, don't worry about it. Everything else, however, is bad, especially the missiles. Because they move really fast, and if they hit you, they'll deplete your shield. While you have unlimited ammo into the Earth, each time you fire and miss, you lose energy. So if your energy runs out, you explode. If your shields get destroyed, you explode. Basically, you're going to explode no matter what. The people on Earth are doomed, and it's your fault. And you know the game is tough when the end bosses give you an easy, relaxing break from the action. They're giant pussies compared to those missiles. Sure, you can destroy the spaceships before they launch missiles. If you can see them, they're like pixels moving at light speed. If you ever make it to the Earth, which you won't, everyone will have died by the time you get there, so you may as well just turn around and fly somewhere else better. Like the Intergalactic Space Arcade. To Jupiter! Maybe I'll find a monolith and shoot it.
I like the music in this style, but this one is merciless. I really prefer Duck Hunt, to be honest. To the Earth is for those of you looking for extreme challenge while wielding your NES Zapper. Every now and then the game gives you a little super bomb to shoot on the bottom right, and an asteroid will fly by that when hit will give you temporary invincibility. What you really need is a grenade launcher.
I come in peace. Stop shooting me. This game is nearly impossible. What I need to defeat it is the Power Glove for extra power and aiming precision. And that special Power Glove smell that never goes away.
The Power Glove definitely makes you look cooler while playing To the Earth, but it really doesn't help. You're still screwed.
Added power. Power Glove.
Yo, I've got two people to thank for sending To the Earth to Classic Game Room. You're both too legit to quit. Ryan from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And Mark and Suzanne from Fresh Meadows, New York, who together equal one person because I don't want to re-record all of that.
Even the Power Glove can't get me through this game. Well, of course you can't get through this game. You're not using the right equipment, like the Sega Justifier. Blam! 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 You know what this game needs? Blast processing.
Where did Sega fanboy Mark come from? I'm gonna kick him out of this review before it gets violent. To the Earth has enough shooting as it is. Did they ever make a sequel? To the Earth 2?
I'm usually pretty good at these games. This one's brutal. Game over. Game over, man. It's game over.
Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. I love that classic NES era Konami music. This brings back some memories. I had Track and Field 2 way back in the day. This is the game that the NES Advantage was made for. Well, this one in Contra. Because Contra had that trick early on, before the internet, before you could just figure anything out, you had to actually use some sort of ingenuity and Scotch tape to hold down the fire button with turbo on your NES Advantage overnight to just shoot those guys jumping off the cliff in the first level. You get a bunch of extra guys. Anyway, that has nothing to do with this game except that it's also from Konami, and Contra is a better game and it has waterfalls. But Track and Field 2 has the Konami jet. Come on, look at this. Nice cutscene. This game was way more exciting back in the day. It's been sitting on my shelf for years, and I was going through looking at some NES games thinking, you know what, I haven't reviewed Track and Field 2. And I've got a Track and Field game for the Atari, so it brought back memories of the days when I was in Track and Field. Yes, did you know that when I was in high school, I was a high jumper? And that's funny, because those were the years before I discovered beer, and I was actually in shape.
On your mark, get set.
And it was actually halfway decent. I jumped over my own height. I'm 4'2". Anyway, so how do you play this game? You waggle the Power Glove around and just give it the finger over and over again. That seems to do a good job. Also, Turbo Fire, alternating left and right, helps with the swimming. Some of the events came right back to me. Others I'm pretty sure I just didn't do right. Like swimming, I don't know. Who cares? There's no lasers, I don't care. Triple jump, on the other hand. Now this brings back some real life
bad memories because I tried triple jumping once, and basically that thing where you jump and then you jump again, I landed and just basically like twisted my knee around, so it was like the one time I ever triple jumped and the last time I ever triple jumped, but I love his little happy dance at the end. Then there's diving, which people seem to care about diving. That's nice. The hammer throw was kind of fun. You just move the NES Advantage joystick around and let go of the button, and you throw this thing and it lands on someone, hopefully. The only events I really liked in Track and Field 2 are the ones where you shot things. I mean, big surprise there, I know. The diving would have been better if there were sharks in the pool. The karate kind of reminded me of Karateka, which also brings back bad flashbacks from when that was my only martial arts game on the Atari 7800. And it's not a good it's a terrible game. It's very bad. This is much better than Karateka, but it's still not a great... It's just not a great game. Track and Field does not make for good video games, but you have to give Konami credit for doing the best job they could possibly do with this. I don't have Track and Field 1, but I think this one has way more events. We've got canoeing. Woo! It's just an excuse to go outside and drink beer. I mean, why... Actually, that does sound like a good Olympic event, come to think of it. Now here's my favorite event in the entire game, archery. Archery is actually really good. Archery and skeet shooting are the best two events in this one. You have to look down there and check the distance, look at the wind, and then you pull back a little bit, let go. You don't even really need the NES Advantage for this one. You're not mashing buttons like the hurdles or something. But the archery's fun. So is the skeet shooting. Ooh, here we have skeet shooting. Now, skeet shooting is a lot of fun. I've done this in real life, too. It's a great time. And considering this one does not use the zapper, it's still a fairly good shooting game, even without the dog that taunts you. Hurdles. When did Hurdles ever have the water traps? Isn't this something they reserve for horses? Isn't there a thing where horses jump over stuff and... I don't know. It's hard to get excited about the hurdles, but if you have the NES Advantage, you just set the turbo fire all the way up, turn the knob all the way to the right, and just hold down the button and jump. Jump when you approach the water, and you'll win the hurdles. Here we have the... I actually forget what this is. The thing where the people spin on the bar. Somebody should punch whoever invented that. Anyway, back to archery, which actually has some real-life practical applications in case you need to shoot some water buffalo or something. Notice I'm on the furthest distance, and I'm still kicking ass. I'm good at archery. And I guess some people probably really enjoyed this one. I don't know. Ooh, pole vault! That's one thing I could never do pole vault in real life. Kind of fun in the game though. This is actually one of the better track and field style events. You just poke the pole where you need to poke the pole, and yeah, that's how that works.
Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. It's Classic Game Room time. When I was a kid, my favorite NES games were Contra, Bionic Commando, and Blaster Master. Not this one because I didn't own it, but now it belongs on that list because it's Jackal, one of my favorite NES games ever. Jackal from 1988 for your Nintendo Entertainment System from Konami in its prime. This game is insanely fun. Jackal has quickly become one of my favorite NES games. It's great. First thing you do is you get dropped off by the G.I. Joe Tomahawk, which I always like, and then I can just start running over people. Like, I like games where I can drive over people. I won't lie to you. It's super fun to just crush people, whether it's in a tank, or a jeep, or a giant robot, or just whatever.
That's true. I think I'm on a vehicle kick this year. After playing Iron Tank, someone suggested that I play Jackal, which I've heard about for years but never bought until just recently. And I immediately fell in love with this game. It's so much fun. It plays really well. It's kind of like Iron Tank, except sillier and not impossible.
Woo! Crunch. Machine gun. Crush. Squash. Explode. I love this game.
I love Jackal's punchy soundtrack, and in typical NES fashion, the first level is pretty easy. But then it gets progressively much harder from there, but not as insanely difficult as Iron Tank. This one is a blast, and you can play 2-player co-op. It's like a clown car with guns. Where do you put all those guys? You rescue POWs or prisoners or whatever, and assuming you don't get blown up on your drive to the helicopter, you drop them off for big points. And then try to shoot down the helicopter.
Look at all the people I've rescued. Not a single one of them thanked me. I'll shoot their helicopter down later. Can I do that? Can you shoot down their helicopter? Nope, just tried. It's a very powerful helicopter.
Unlike your parents' Grand Cherokee, your Jeep has 2 weapons, a machine gun with which you can strafe, and an explosive weapon that you aim in the direction that you're driving, and you level that weapon up by collecting special prisoners, or whoever they are. They have special leveling up powers. At the end of each round, there's a boss battle. The first one is actually pretty tricky. Then you make your way to the next round. Notice I went from a grenade to a missile, and then you level the missiles up with even more explosive power.
If you don't like Jackal, you have no soul.
It's simple but effective. That's what Jackal gets right. It doesn't do anything fancy. It just does what it does well.
This music has a hint of Contra in it, which I like. But I like everything about Contra.
And I like pretty much everything about Jackal. It's the perfect game for the NES, and it's not all that expensive either. It's got this wonderful Konami soundtrack, it plays well, it's got 2-player. You run over people with a Jeep, and machine gun bad guys. What's not to love? Make sure not to get hit. One shot will take out your Jeep. It's poorly made. I love the level designs and the overly complicated enemy bases with lasers. Because why wouldn't you assume that the enemy will attack from only one direction in 2 dimensions?
Yeah! Jackal! Here? Okay. Oh man, I got a long ways to go. I've only made it this far so far.
I'm playing this one with the Analog NT Mini, and Jackal has one of the more realistic difficulty curves for NES games in this genre from the era.
Even though I thoroughly enjoy Jackal, I feel like finding some Game Genie codes for the review.
A little assistance never hurts when trying to record level diversity. This is starting to look like Ikari Warriors 2 here.
But unlike SNK, Konami will punch you in the face, but not light you on fire afterwards. It's Jackal, one of Konami's bests that you rarely hear about. Grab a friend, play together, or just crush the enemies by yourself. It's always fun. It's a wonderful game, highly recommended. For your Nintendo Entertainment System. Crunch! Banished from Earth Classic Game Room broadcasts from the Intergalactic Space Arcade on its never-ending mission to review everything. Welcome to Classic Game Room. It's really cold outside right now, fitting for a review of Ice Climber. Of course it's cold. We're in outer space, devoid of atmosphere, so it's pretty much freezing. But I can still go outside and fight aliens without a helmet. Ice Climber. Doesn't have aliens, but it has Arctic Wonderland creatures that you're gonna hit with a hammer. Bundle up, children, because we're about to go for a mountainous adventure. Upwards. It's Ice Climber. Released in 1985 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. An excellent Nintendo game that doesn't even star Mario. You play as some kid running from the Popo. Or wait, no, that's his name. Sorry, Popo is his name. And climbing ice is his game. I like his jacket. That looks warm. Seems like a fitting time to review Ice Climber, as I'm eagerly anticipating Polar Vortex on the Vectrex. Sounds like a great game to keep warm in outer space. Ice Climber is a very good game, a popular release on the NES, but not one that you hear much about these days. It doesn't have 500 sequels like Donkey Kong or Metroid. For the most part, it feels like an old school Nintendo arcade game, but it's just different enough to keep it interesting. There's just something about Ice Climber. It's hard to put a finger on it. The controls aren't as tight as a normal Nintendo arcade game, and that makes climbing the ice a bit tricky. Maybe that's what they were going for. Because I don't know about you, but the last time I tried to climb an ice tower, it was cold and slippery. It's the realism, people. The realism. That parka looks warm, but kinda hard to jump in. He should have the backpack from Hero. That would make his life a lot easier. So here's what you do. You climb your way through various stages, battling enemies along the way, scoring points, and then challenge the bonus stage. If you can climb that in time and grab the bird, you'll score a lot of bonus points and then make a warm soup out of the bird. They don't have that cutscene in the game though, but trust me, it's good soup. So you get points for just about everything. Smashing the bricks is an easy way to score a couple extra ones. But like any arcade-style game, the more time that you spend on screen in a level increases the chance that you're going to get offed. So eventually you want to just get out of there and collect your bonus points. And enjoy that delicious soup.
If you don't make it through the bonus stage in time, you continue, but Popo and his entire family starve to death and then freeze. Ice Climber gives you added incentive to climb that ice. You're not just playing for points, you're playing for survival. And don't forget to kill some of those extra creatures on your climb because they make a nice side dish for that bowl of soup. Ice Climber is a lot harder than it looks, by the way. Just watching the footage here doesn't really convey the sense of urgency that you'll feel when desperately attempting to jump from platform to platform, especially when they start moving. You can also enjoy Ice Climber, 2-player, and dig the catchy music. It's simple, yet uplifting. Ice-tastic. For some strange reason, someone leaves vegetables and whatever laying around on these ice shelves. At least they're kept cold, so that's a good thing. And I feel like I use my Frogger skills when trying to hop my way through the bonus rounds here. To be honest, I like this game. I never had it back in the day. I've heard a lot about Ice Climber. And you can get this affordably on the NES or pick it up affordably on the Virtual Console. Hooray! Popo gets soup. And, I guess, what is that? Pickles. Pickles go well with soup. Nothing wrong with that. I have a classic game room shout out and thank you to send all the way to Fresh Meadows, New York, to Mark, formerly of Brooklyn, New York. So once again, thank you, Mark. Thank you for Ice Climber. A game that I'll highly recommend. There's a lot of levels, a lot of fun, a lot of different ways to score points. Ice Climber, yeah, it's good, but you know what would make this game a lot better? A flamethrower, because that way you could just melt the tower and bring everything down to you. What's better than one Cobra? Twin Cobra, of course. Released in 1988 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, this is one of the best arcade-style vertical-scrolling shooters you'll find on the NES, and this was originally developed by Toaplan, and you know what that means. Twin Cobra is related to Truxton, and it's a great game. What you do is you fly a little helicopter around and blow the crap out of everything that moves or sits still. Basically, you just shoot everything and score points. We've all played this game before, and we're happy to play it again, especially when it plays well like Twin Cobra. For this review, I'm rocking the Analog Interactive Analog NT, which is a super high-end NES. And while the music and sound effects aren't that spectacular, it's a great-looking game on the NES, with a lot of color and good detail. Most importantly, it's extremely playable with excellent controls. I'm also using the almighty NES Advantage, and you know I love the Advantage. After each round, you fight an end boss and then score bonus points depending on how many of those stars with the P in them you've collected. And like the other Toaplan shooters I've played, if you take one hit, you're destroyed, so be careful. Watch what you're flying into. And watch your sides in this game. There's frequently enemies hiding off to the left or right that are still shooting at you when you fly by. The screen has a lot of horizontal movement in this game, which I think is great. Gives you a lot of options. Here's some direct feed recording out of the Analog NT using S-Video, which looks pretty damn sharp. It looks like HDMI, but this is S-Video. I reviewed this game years ago on the Sega Genesis, and while I think the Genesis version is better, this is one of the top 5 NES vertical scrolling shooters.
I like the diversity in backgrounds, it plays really well, there's a good difficulty curve. You really can't go wrong with Twin Cobra, just don't confuse it with Twin Hawk or Cobra Command. All different games. I'll bet that's fun if you're listening to this on headphones. The analog NT will separate the audio if you want it to, or bring it together into mono. Which I think actually sounds better for Twin Cobra. I'd stay with mono on this one. There's 4 different weapons to choose from. Your standard red shot, which turns into a bit of a spread shot. The blue bubble spread shot. The green turbo laser fire thing, which is terrible. And a 4-way shot, which also doesn't work very well. I'd stick with the red one. You'll also collect some super bombs, which are handy for boss battles, and if you happen to get surrounded by enemies, which you will, especially when you start level 4. There's a fair amount of flicker and some slowdown, as you might expect for an NES game with this much on screen. But for the most part, it still plays really well. Definitely one of the best shooters on NES. I've got a Twin Cobra-sized shout-out and thank you to send to Mark and Suzanne from Fresh Meadows, New York once again. Thank you for sending Twin Cobra. You're up there in the massive pins surrounding New York City. I need to get a bigger map. Twin Cobra is fairly easy to find online, it's not terribly expensive, and it makes a great addition to your NES collection. Thanks again, Mark and Suzanne. This game is highly recommended, and you don't need the analog NT to play it. Your standard NES will do just fine. And don't forget to check out my review of the Genesis version.
Now it is the beginning of a fantastic journey. Let us make a journey to the Cave of Monsters. Good luck, you'll need it. In Bobble for the Nintendo Entertainment System, being played here on the NES Classic Edition. Bobble, where you control one of 2 dragons, Bub or Bob. This is the single player campaign. You can also play 2-player cooperatively. This game reminds me a lot of the original Mario Brothers from Nintendo, which is a good thing because that's my favorite Nintendo game. Bobble is wonderful, and for some reason it's taken me this long to get to it. I don't have the actual game cartridge, although from what I've seen online, it's not terribly expensive to collect. I think this is the first review of a game from the NES Classic Edition, which I'm a big fan of. I like that thing, so I've got a huge Classic Game Room shout out and thank you going to my man Derek from Sulphur, Louisiana for sending the NES Classic to the show. Thank you, Derek. Thank you for giving me a sweet version of Bubble Bobble. This game is as good as everyone says it is. It's just so cheerful and so much fun. It's so easy to get into, but incredibly difficult to master. Let's take a look at what you do. You kill things with bubbles. Sort of. Actually, as you probably noticed, what you do is trap enemies within bubbles. Although, why are these dragons shooting bubbles in the first place? What happened to these poor dragons that they shoot bubbles instead of fire or laser beams? That just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, this is from Taito, the makers of Space Invaders, so as you might expect, it gets extremely difficult quickly after the game gets you into the basic mechanics. Bubble Bobble showers you with a variety of enemies. that you attack in more or less the same way each time. You fire bubbles at them, trap them, and then, like Mario Brothers, you have to hit them again to finish the job. And as you just saw, if you can chain a whole bunch of kills together, you get some super bonus items, all the food that spews forth from the rotting carcasses. Makes about as much sense as a roast turkey that gives you health laying beneath a trash can. That does give it added flavor, though. So, this game has a very present arcade-style risk versus reward system. Do you play it safe and just kill the enemies one at a time and get rid of them, or do you try to ensnare all of them at once and hit them together and get some bonus points? I find that I find the more that I played this game, that I would just shoot enemies with bubbles and like just let them float off and out of the way, out of harm's way. But it gets tricky fast, and there's just a lot of different ways to play it, so there's no one way that you have to complete each level, and I love that about this game. I love Bubble Bobble, what else can I say? There's some weird power-ups laying around, you pick those up, and you try to spell extra to get an extra guy. You can also continue with a password save system, which is nice, and the NES Classic presentation is terrific, as you can see. This looks good. I like Taito games, Space Invaders, Arkanoid, U-Maze, and Bubble Bobble. I also enjoy their humorous level designs like this one, which is a nod to their very own Space Invaders. Arkanoid does some similar things. This is such a clever game, and it started the entire Bubble Bobble series. There's a whole bunch of these by now. It's a series I never really think about, but now I think I need to give it some more attention. I guess I'm taking a break here from Pac-Man month for a different game. Working on Namco Museum for the Dreamcast and GameCube behind the scenes, and the Switch. If you're gonna take a break from Pac-Man, you may as well play something good, like Bubble Bobble. Or at least Earth Defense Force. So there you go, once again, Bubble Bobble. If you like the original Mario Brothers, I think you're going to love this. Tons of fun. Thank you again, Derek from Louisiana. And thank you, Taito, for making so many amazing games like this. Got a long way to go to get any good at it. But it's fun, and I love the cheerful gameplay. I love the style of this game. Bubble Bobble. Who doesn't love dragons that shoot bubbles? Really, who doesn't love dragons that shoot anything? Can you even call yourself a dragon if you don't shoot something? You can't. At that point, you're just a stupid lizard. Welcome to Classic Game Room, broadcasting from the Intergalactic Space Arcade, where I've got one of the all-time arcade greats on the NES right here. This is Donkey Kong Jr. We all know his dad is Donkey Kong, but who's his mom? Anyone? Ms. Pac-Man? It's Donkey Kong Jr., and what's the first thing that you think I think of whenever I hear the word Junior? If you watch this show, it's not that hard. Come on. That's right. The Whopper Jr. from Burger King. The Whopper Jr. is my favorite fast food hamburger. I prefer it over the original Whopper for a variety of reasons, none of which has anything at all to do with this game, except that I like Donkey Kong Jr. more than regular Donkey Kong.
The original Whopper is just too big. The original Donkey Kong is too rigid in its gameplay mechanics. Burger King and Nintendo made improvements when creating the Junior. Donkey Kong Jr. is just a fabulous arcade game. Originally released to the arcades in 1982, this is the Nintendo Entertainment System version, which is just about as good. This has got to be the best home console version of Donkey Kong Jr., which makes me hungry every time I say that. We should have a party every time I make it through that level, because that level is my nemesis. 9 times out of 10 I lose a life in this game, it's on that level. Usually from those damn birds. If only Donkey Kong Jr. could clear them out with a flamethrower beforehand. Flame broiled. Just like a Whopper Jr. Those electric sparks or whatever can suck it, because I rock this level. I love Donkey Kong Jr., it's so much fun. And while most people probably prefer the original, there's more to do in Donkey Kong Jr. Anyway, regardless, it's a great game, and the NES version is outstanding. He captures the arcade look and feel of the original and plays well on the D-pad. You gotta double fist those keys to get them up there quickly. I like this level a lot. In fact, I like all the levels in this game except for that one part where the birds kill me. Over and over and over again. I think there's more ways to score points in Donkey Kong Jr. than the original, and you're still rewarded for getting through levels quickly with a big bonus. Now, the whole premise here is that you're saving Donkey Kong from Mario, who's locked him in a cage because presumably he doesn't have access to any Burger Kings and he's got to eat sometime. I'm not sure if that's the official description of this game, but that's sort of how I take it. I like to see the dark side of Mario. It's cool when he's a bad guy. Like, Mario is just so famous now. He's the face of Nintendo. He's the ultimate good guy. And that's unrealistic. I firmly believe Mario kicks Pokemon when no one is looking. I know I do. If you think about it, Mario isn't just being a bad guy in this game. Like, oh, he's up to no good. No, Donkey Kong is locked in a cage, and Mario's trying to electrocute his son while his father watches. That's sadistic. In the end, I think we all need to ask ourselves, does Mario really get the punishment that he deserves? And I don't think so. He usually ends up with a mild concussion, but then he's back at it again. Let's go. Die, Donkey Kong Jr. I'm going to attack you with birds. That's not a very good guy thing to do, is it, Mario? If there were any justice in this video game world, Donkey Kong Jr. would leave a rake sticking up right below where Mario's about to fall. But until then, you've just got to keep playing Donkey Kong Jr. on your NES over and over and over again, because it's fun. So here's a classic Game Room shout out and thank you to my homeboy Mark from Brooklyn, New York, for sending this game to the show. It's one of the best NES games that you can get, because it's based on one of the best arcade machines ever made. That's what happens when I try to rush this level. Oh well, guess where I'm going to lunch.
Aliens have invaded Earth, and you, Captain Skyhawk, are the only person who can stop them. Sound familiar? Yes, about 50,000 games on the NES share the exact same plot, but Captain Skyhawk is not your average spaceship shooter. At its heart, this may be a top-down, vertical scrolling shooter, but it also has a camera behind the jet shooting down enemies, Thunder Blade Air Raiders Top Gun kind of mode, and a spaceship docking level lifted straight out of 2001. The movie, not the year. Fly your F-14 into space, dock with a space station, and outfit it with weapons. I haven't seen this much realism since an episode of G.I. Joe. And if you're familiar with the cartoon, you know what I'm talking about. The one they flew their F-14s into space, and you're like, what? Those things can't fly in space, but they can because they're G.I. Joe F-14s. Well, apparently, Captain Skyhawk has the same jet. My theory is Shipwreck got drunk and lost his in a bet to Captain Skyhawk. It's like the Millennium Falcon, but not quite as cool. Captain Skyhawk is a very different game from most of the top-down 2D style shooters on the NES, like Zanac and Star Soldier. Technically, it is absolutely marvelous. Just look at this game. This is an 8-bit game. The controls are very different from most spaceship shooters, just not necessarily how the game is played, but just the feel of the aircraft. Like, it doesn't just stop on a dime like a spaceship. Naturally, because it's an F-14. You're flying very quickly through a three-dimensionally styled landscape, so in a way this game is far more focused on flying rather than just dodging bullet patterns or enemies. Because most of the enemies are pretty stupid, and you just need to actually stay out of their line of fire. And the tricky part is really just not flying into things. And then there's these pseudo-end bosses that you get to fight, and you're outfitting your jet with a super secret weapon. Captain Skyhawk is one of these games that's very ambitious. And I will applaud the developers for that, because Captain Skyhawk stands out on the NES. Surprisingly, it's not one that I had back in the day. This was donated recently by Mike from Galloway Township in New Jersey. No, I'm not using Turbo Fire on the NES Advantage. I've upgraded the machine gun on my F-14. And just crashed into a mountain. I'll continue for the review here, just to show you where the game heads. Towards New Jersey. That could be the Delaware River right below me. Who can say? Well, Captain Skyhawk is fun and ambitious. It does fall into the I tried a bit too much too early trap that many of these old school games did. Sure, it probably blew people away back in the day, but now if you're looking for just a good old school style spaceship shooter, Captain Skyhawk doesn't really deliver that. If you're looking for an Afterburner or Thunderblade Top Gun style camera behind the jet airplane shooting game, it doesn't really deliver that either. Although, without question, the spaceship docking scenes are better than trying to land the airplane in Top Gun. Captain Skyhawk delivers an interesting mix of genres. It's a bit like Zaxxon, a bit like every other spaceship shooter, and a bit like Top Gun, but not quite, so it's just its own thing, and maybe that's why the game is cool. Because it is cool. And without question, that's what Captain Skyhawk has going for it. It's cool. It's ambitious. It's different. It's not the best shooter on the NES. Not even close. But it's Captain Skyhawk. Just think about it. If you can't name your kid Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon, you name them Captain Skyhawk. Nobody
Nobody will mess with them in the lunch line. Thanks again to Mike for donating the game. You can easily find Captain Skyhawk, the NES game cartridge, out there online used these days. I haven't heard of any remakes, but maybe we'll be surprised. It seems like a lot of these games are coming back out of the blue, like Buck Rogers. We can only hope that if Captain Skyhawk is ever remade, that they just keep those awesome spaceship landing scenes.
Welcome to Classic Game Room for the review of Taito's amazing arcade game Elevator Action on the NES. Watch the ending for the bad outtake. In case of fire, use the stairs. What's this guy supposed to do if the power goes out? All this building has is elevators and the occasional escalator. Why, of course, it's Taito's 1983 classic, Elevator Action, capably handled on your Nintendo Entertainment System. This is a great game on the NES. It's a great game on the Game Boy, too. Why, it's just a good game. And did you ever know the story? I'll read it to you. The story. As Super Sleuth, Agent 17, codenamed Otto, no doubt named after the bad guy in Berserk, you must come out from undercover to accept a top secret mission. Your country's security is at stake. What country? They're not clear on that. I'm riding the elevators for Belgium. There'd better be some beer and waffles at the... Oh my god, I just crushed that guy with an elevator. That's awesome. Should make more crushing sounds, though. Elevator Action is just tons of fun. It's a good, straightforward arcade game. Easy for about the first 2 levels, and then it just kicks your ass. And as you can see, it looks great here on the NES. I'm not sure why, but the whole time I was playing it, I kept thinking, you know, this reminds me of Rolling Thunder mixed with Spy vs. Spy of all games. Elevator Action, of course, predates those. What you do is you descend your way through this building filled with doors, and you have to enter the red doors and collect the documents inside. If you miss one of the doors, the game rewinds you back to the door if you happen to complete the level without it. And here's what happens when I miss an opportunity to squash a bad guy. He shoots me. So always squash people with elevators. I think that's just a good life lesson in general. You can score some bonus points by dropping lights on bad guys or shooting them in darkened hallways, but you score the big points by making it through the levels. And to do that, you've got to ride the elevators all the way down. It gets tricky near the bottom of the buildings. They should combine this game with Rampage. That would be interesting. Sometimes you gotta transfer elevators or jump over the empty shafts. It's a tricky game. Harder than it looks here. By level 3 it gets really tough because the enemies shoot much faster. And you're not that maneuverable. The controls are extremely rigid. While it plays well, you gotta be careful not to get yourself in a position where you're surrounded by bad guys. Because you're slow. And when you start riding things like an escalator, for example, you can't turn around if they're about to shoot you. You've gotta patiently ride the escalator all the way to the bottom, make sure your laces are tied, and then you'll take a bullet to the head. I find the music super annoying after a while. It's hard to play the game for a long period of time thanks to the music. It gets repetitive quickly. You can control the elevators while you're in them. You don't have to, you're not at the elevator's mercy like the escalators. Those things are dangerous. In order to ride them, you have to stand directly in front and push up or down. It's a tricky game, but a lot of fun. I played this one back in the day. It's every bit as good as I remember. It was also a lot of fun on the Game Boy. And this one is fairly easy to collect. It's affordable. Totally worth owning for your NES collection. See, this would be a good time to just kick out a window and rappel down the side of the building on the outside.
But no, I'm gonna ride the escalators and elevator. I'm actually gonna get shot here, but before I do, let me get my classic game room shout out and thank you to Christopher from Salem, Oregon. Thank you to Christopher for sending elevator action to the show. Who doesn't love action in the elevator? They're always so clean and have great music. In the classic game room, if elevators were half as much fun as this game, I'd ride them all the time. It's elevator action. More of an escalator man myself. That sucked.